Welcome to Wine with Friends, where meaningful connection and thoughtful conversation are always present when we share wine intentionally. Tonight, we have a very special guest, as always, but really special this evening. A gentleman who I just recently got to meet not too long ago, call it 4 or 5 days ago. He is the estate director at BOND Winery in Napa Valley, and also just so happens to be the only Master Sommelier here in the state of North Carolina. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Max Kast.
Hey, Marcus, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Real honor to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here this evening. And right off the bat, I just want to draw some attention to these lovely bottles of wine that we have here. So I know this is your first time on the pod. Hopefully it won't be your last. Typically what we do here, Max, is we open the bottle to start the pod.
Yep, cool.
But I see here that we've got some bottles that are already open.
Yeah, so coming from a German family, I always like to be really prepared.
Love that.
And being prepared before I leave the house, I want to make sure that the wines are in good condition. So particularly if you're dealing with one wine that is, only 5 years younger than me, I wanted to make sure that it was solid before I brought it in, and in case I had to bring another.
Yeah, well, we certainly appreciate that thoughtfulness. So I think we should be following your lead this evening. Tell us where we start.
Yeah, so sometimes I don't know, right? So I think we'll start with the Scorpion today.
Okay.
So we'll start in South Africa.
South Africa.
And we'll start in what I think is one of the most dynamic regions in South Africa, it's the Swartland. It's really, a region that's about 250 years old. South Africa, over 400 years of wine growing there. They have some of the longest history of certain grape varieties, and they have very unique grape varieties that are grown there. And they're known specifically for Chenin Blanc. And the Chenin Blanc there has been there for so long that it has its own biotype. So you have like 13 original registered clones, I think actually 18 clones, that are unique to South Africa. So since it's a warmer climate than the Loire Valley, you have thicker skins, but you still have that high acidity that makes Chenin Blanc so delicious. You also have Palomino here. And Palomino, there's a long history of making fortified wines in South Africa. So with that, Palomino being a lower acidity white grape, but having really nice texture to it as well, makes this wine delicious on so many ways. So we're almost 10 years old here. This is Eben Sadi. Eben, one of my favorite winemakers in the world. He does single vineyards, old vine single vineyards that if he wouldn't make the wines, honestly, likely these vineyards would be torn up. So he's turned them into something truly special. And, there's only, in some cases, maybe 250 cases each of these single vineyard wines.
250 cases of the single vineyard.
Of the single vineyards, yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, already this color is magnificent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing this.
No. These wines are special for me. I love
already we're going to dive right into one of the things that we think is so important when we talk about wine, and it's the story.
Yep.
So already having heard about where this comes from and all the different things that are happening in this region, this winemaker who you love so much.
Yeah.
And for us, we've been talking about stories over scores. And so to hear stories like this, already gets you attached to the wine and interested in the wine in a way that is very different than seeing a sticker that says this is 92 points.
Because what does that mean, ultimately, right? So, for me, points are good. They have their purpose. But at the same time, it's the story behind the points. Why are you giving those points that? And for me, it's how does the wine make you feel? Does it bring you joy? Does it bring you happiness? And then if it does, man, I want to know everything about it. Mm-hmm. And I want to know the winemaker. I want to get to know that. For me, those are the things that really excite me in wine.
Well, thank you for sharing this.
Cheers. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Can't wait to hear what you think.
Yeah. Right off the bat, the texture. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would characterize that as silky. And I love that. It's something that's recognizable.
Yep.
Off the jump. This wine feels, to me, extremely balanced. I get the acidity that you talked about, but not in a way that's off-putting. Mm-hmm. I certainly want another sip, which is beyond the score and even beyond the story, do you want more?
Yep.
This has already got me wanting another sip.
Yeah.
I'm excited to, have that second sip. Am I crazy I feel this honey in there.
Yeah. Honey, chamomile. You get that like bruised sort of pear, bruised lemon sort of aroma. But on the palate, you're right, it's velvety. It has roundness and creaminess, and then that acidity cuts into it, so it's multi-dimensional. So you have like this elevation and roundness at the same time, so it's expansive. But I love what you said, because one of my, back when I was still working the floor and was a sommelier on the floor, I'd tell people when they'd say wine's delicious, I'm like, you know what, that's my favorite tasting note. That's the most important tasting note that there is, right? Because if you don't think it's delicious, we need to find you another wine.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah.
As you kind of reflect on being back on the floor as a somm, tell us about what transpired from your beginnings in Detroit, from a German family, which you've already mentioned, to now, being a prominent figure at BOND and all the way in between.
How much time do you have?
We got all the time that we need. Trust me. We got plenty of wine.
Yeah.
We're good to go.
All right, cool, man. Thank you. So I grew up in the suburbs outside of Detroit, one of nine kids. I've, super talented siblings, fortunately, and really loving siblings who were big inspirations for me. My parents were both really into food and wine, and having family in Germany, would go there often. I was lucky enough as a kid to travel to France and Germany and Switzerland, places like that. And I was like, oh man, not only are these places so cool, but food is so delicious, and every place there's food, there's happy people, and people are connecting. And as a kid, falling asleep at my mom's feet, having at the table,
right,
talking to relatives. So I always had that there was something romantic about food, wine, and the table, right? I call it the art of the table, right? And I loved skiing growing up. I loved the mountains. I loved nature. My older brother went to the University of Montana, and I would go out there, ski, would hang out, and I loved it. It's a cool place. I still think Missoula is one of the coolest little cities in the world. And I went out there, got my degree in history. I was on the 7-year college track.
Okay. Gosh, good for you.
But it's not. It wasn't just. I was doing a lot of different things, right? So that's when I started working in restaurants. I skied a lot. I did things like promoting concerts. I'm a bass player, so I played in bands. And most importantly, I met my wife. And in meeting my wife, I'm like, oh, I need to. At the same time, I decided that I was going to make wine my career. So there's this period where we're just kind of all the stars aligned, right? And it's cool. I met someone I love. I found the career that I love, because it takes history, economics, science, geography, art, culture. It takes everything that I had an interest in, and it is one thing, right? It's this beverage that is part of nature, but then also an ephemeral art form that once the bottle's gone, all you have is your memories of it and the people you're with, right? So I'm still to this day, I'm a kid in the candy store, and I think about a great bottle of wine. I was so stoked to open this up. I'm like, oh, I know it's going to be great.
Having it right now. Thanks again.
And then, it was there that I got my first kind of serious gig. Fortunately, at a Relais and Chateau in the Bitterroot Valley in Montana, when I was at 25, and incredibly lucky. My daughter was 1 year old at that point, and we had to make things happen. So, and then eventually, the general managers there invited me to go to a Relais and Chateau conference in Switzerland, and I met R.B. Fitch and Teresa Chiatini. R.B., the owner of Farrington House, and Teresa, the longtime general manager. And they we kept in touch, and they're like, hey, why don't you come out here? We have a position open. And they moved us out here, and we raised my daughter here. My granddaughter was born here. We have this whole whole life here. Yeah. So North Carolina is an important part of that. So I was wine director at the Farrington House, one of places super special for me, for 10 years. And through that time, I passed the advanced exam, which is the third level on the Court of Master Sommeliers paths of certification.
Okay.
And then 2011, I sat the Master Sommelier exam. And that really got into a mode of real serious performance and studying, and a path of many challenges, put it that way. Yeah. So 2011, I don't know in the other podcasts, and I'm sure you're familiar with some aspects of it.
I would love for you to dive into that for our listeners. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So with the examinations, you have 4 levels. You have the introductory examination, which is we do 2-day courses. At the end of it, there's a quiz, and you get your introductory pin, which allows you to take the certified exam, which is exponentially harder. And you do a service exam, a blind tasting, and a theory exam. And you have to pass all those to become a certified sommelier. Once you do that, we have our advanced course, which is one of the coolest things we do. So it's like 3.5 days of blind tasting breakout tables with master sommeliers, and like really detailed lectures and the like. And that is, I mean, when you go to that, like every time I participate now as a master sommelier, I'm like, oh man, this is the coolest thing ever. And I'm inspired by it. And then after that, you have the advanced exam, which is quite hard. The pass rate there, I think, is like between 20 and 25%.
Wow.
And that is, again, blind tasting, theory, and service. Okay. And then you become eligible to sit the Master Sommelier exam. And when you do that, you have to pass the theory portion first. And then from there, you do blind tasting and practical. So at the blind tasting, you have 6 wines. You have 3 white and 3 reds. And you have 25 minutes to describe the site, aromatic structure, your initial conclusion, and then your final conclusion. Then you have to get ultimately grape variety, region, country, and vintage. Within that. So that's, most people consider that the very difficult part. All of them are difficult. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the service was my Achilles heel the first 5 attempts. Okay. So the first time I sat the exam in 2011, I passed blind tasting and I passed theory. Okay. I didn't pass service, even though I was working at a 5-star, 5-diamond Relais and Chateau, running a wine program, and 2 years in a row I didn't pass it. So if you don't pass all 3 parts in 3 attempts, you reset. You have to take everything over again. Yeah. So I had to take theory again in 14, then didn't pass blind tasting, didn't pass service, started seeing a sports psychologist, working reading on tons of books on performance, like some of Phil Jackson's books. And then also George Mumford, who's an amazing book on performance and meditation. So really delve deep into like how to get your mind set to really perform at the highest level. Sure. So many people sit that exam. They have the knowledge and they have the skill set, but it's the performance mindset that they don't have, which I'm sure you can relate to on many levels, given your experience. Absolutely. With so much pressure that you were under in your career, right? So with that, I finally passed the service. Then I didn't pass blind tasting 2 more times. Reset. 2017, I didn't pass theory. I get to an end, I promise. And then in 2018, I pass, and I get to the point where I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah. This is the last time I do it. I don't care. I have, my wife, and she has a great business. I love my job. My daughter, she's happy. Like, everything's great. If I don't pass this,
no stress.
No stress, yeah. Right? So I'm like, if I pass, great. If I don't, it's the last time I'm doing it. Go in with that mentality, pass theory. Go in a couple months later, pass blind tasting, pass service, pass the whole exam. The caveat is that 5 weeks later, I get a call from my mentor, one of my mentors, and he's like, Max, this is going to be the hardest phone call I've ever had to give in my life. And he went, the exam was compromised. The blind tasting exam was compromised. And everyone who passed the tasting exam, that is nullified, and you have to retake the tasting.
Okay, so how are we compromised?
One of the examiners had given some of the wines to some of his mentees.
Shit.
So with that being the case,
Scandal.
it was, and it was a completely stressful time period. It's not the most stressful thing I've ever had to deal with, but it definitely was stressful given all the sacrifices, my wife and my daughter, I put them through in all those years studying and things like that. And all my friends and all the people in this community in North Carolina that have been massive helps to me and kind of cheerleaders for me, So.
And there's a financial risk too. No, I mean, this is not a free test.
No, it's not a free test. And, it is an investment. The biggest investment being the wine to practice on studying, your books, like travel to visit different mentors and blind taste and get mentorship. All of those things add up, right? And fortunately, I had an employer that was very generous in helping out in that, but that's not always the case. Yeah. And I'm forever grateful for that. But still, it was still a massive kind of financial commitment on my family's end.
Right.
All of that being said, the opportunity to go back and sit the exam again in December. They paid for everything, and to the Court of Master Sommelier, I feel in the way that they've finally dealt. It was a very difficult thing to deal with on so many levels. There was no good choices, right. But everyone that sat that exam can sit it continually.
Okay.
And they'll pay for free, right? So they until they ultimately,
way to make it right.
And ultimately those times they paid for your flight over there. They paid for your.
So where were you physically taking this test?
In St. Louis that time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went back. Everything I learned about performance was on like tenfold. I had to block out everything, block out any sort of expectation, and just went down there, blind tasted, passed again, and I ended up passing twice in 1 year. So.
Not many people can say that.
Yeah, no, it was a crazy experience, man. But thank you for humoring me and listening to all that.
That's an incredible story.
That's a long one.
I love that. I appreciate that. And then there's a lot that I want to go back to, but just to bring it all the way back to BOND. So then from passing in 2018,
yep.
Now you've got this amazing certification as one of few people around the world as a Master Sommelier. And then where does that take your career after?
So at the time, I was working for an importer called Broadbent Selections, and I was doing regional sales. And after passing the exam, they created a director of education role for me. So I started doing more events nationally, traveling nationally, then also teaching with the Court of Master Sommeliers. So kind of broadening my experience, and then also working on my presentations and things like that, right? And then after, it ends up being a really small community, the wine world, as I'm sure you know, right? Like,
starting to learn, yeah. I love it.
And it's one of the best communities, I think, in the world. And after a while, a friend of mine said, "Oh, I think I want to introduce you to Corey Emptings, the director of wine growing for BOND," and connected me. And so yeah, we got along well. We had a Zoom meeting. It was still the pandemic, and a pretty long Zoom meeting. Started talking about Barolo and Burgundy and old Napa Valley wines. We're like, oh yeah, we have some similar tastes in wines, and most importantly, have a similar philosophy in the way we view wine and its place. And for me, that's an important thing. After that, I got to meet Will Harlan, who's the managing director of the wineries now, and I had a good conversation with him. About 2 months and 12 interviews later.
12 interviews.
Midway through, I sourced a bottle of 2011 Pluribus, which is one of our single vineyards up in Spring Mountain, and it's like, oh, I want to been a while since I tried the wines. I want to make sure that I believe in these wines 1,000%. And I opened up the wine, decanted it, made a meal for my wife and I, and it's like, oh man, it blew me away. And like this is something deeply meaningful, and I'm excited about this. So continued on that. They finally hired me, and it's just such an amazing organization. And working with the Harlan family, who are just incredibly innovative, but very thoughtful, like business operators, and very philosophical in the way that they operate. And working with Corey Enting, who is just such a, it's the best way of putting it, intuitive wine grower. Like, he's very focused on the vineyards, focused on farming in a very holistic way, and out of that coaxing out the kind of most true quality from the vineyards that we work, and then from there in the cellar, kind of respecting all of that, and letting the wines really take their truest expression in the cellar as well. Which sounds somewhat esoteric, but it's the results are truly, there's beautiful energy in the wines, and I just feel like the luckiest person on earth.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
One thing that I hear in this story is perseverance. The perseverance that it took for you to sit for your Master Sommelier exam 6 times, 12 interviews to start working with BOND. You talked about kind of the athlete's mindset and working with that sports psychologist to get your mind in that right place. What is it like for a winemaker to have perseverance?
So, not speaking from experience, but knowing a lot of winemakers and people, wine growers as we refer to it, right? Because it really is, you're a farmer, right? And you're at the whims of nature. The people who have the most perseverance that I know are wine growers, because they are reacting to the land every single year. And as we know, the land is not consistent, or the climate is not consistent either, right? So you have to, and I feel lucky, like with Corey, or someone like Evan Sadi as well. They know the land so well because they've been intimately working with it for a long time. So if you know the land, you in a difficult year, you have the ability to make decisions based off of your knowledge of that land, right? So you can kind of navigate the world in that sense. And then it's hard because it's so much hard work that you're putting into something, and then you go out and the rest of the world is judging it, right? And that's it's kind of a deeply personal thing that you let out to the world. And I find I have nothing but the greatest respect for winemakers in that sense.
And along those lines, when you think about sports, and you talked about geography, science, culture, and all those things coming together in wine. Yep. I like to think about it as an art form. And so can you talk about how wine feels artistic to you?
Yeah, of course. So, not to keep on bringing out the company I work for, but at BOND and with the family, we view that like wine itself at its highest level reaches the form of great art. And it is within that sense, great artwork inspires you. Great artwork lifts you up from the everyday, and it takes you away from your worries. It builds your creativity, inspires your creativity. It makes you kind of more at one in the world in many ways, right? It gives you stop everything. You stop your mind, you slow down, and you take your time with this thing, which is a snapshot of a moment in time. And, in that, it's one of the great art forms ever, I think, to your point, right? It really is that encapsulating a single year of nature from one single place, right? The Scorpion, this one little place in the Swartland, out there with calcareous soil right on the Atlantic, like the year after year after year, Eben makes this wine from this one spot. And, with that sense, every year we have this opportunity to enjoy the nuanced differences in each one of those years, right? So there will be consistency, but each year there'll be differences as well. And that's what I love about what I do with Bond. We have these 5 different vineyards, and each year you get 5 different snapshots of what those vintages are like. So it really is, like, for me, the most fascinating art form, along with music. And that's, I think music's the ultimate art form. Personally, I'm biased, but.
A picture, they say, is worth 1,000 words.
Yep.
So how many words do you think a bottle of wine is worth?
I think a bottle of wine, a great bottle of wine, there's so many things to describe it that ultimately you're left speechless. So it goes beyond words and speaks to your soul. I
love that.
That's what I think.
I love that. And what we also love hearing you say is that it slows you down. Mm-hmm. Right now, I feel like life, at least here in the U.S., is about as fast as it's ever been. We're constantly pulled in so many different directions, doing all the things, maybe not diving as deep into one or two things as, being spread all over the place. And so to have the opportunity to slow down, to be thoughtful, to be intentional about those moments that you talked about is one of the things that I think is one of the most important things about wine, is its ability to slow us down and to keep us present in one moment.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think things like that, to your point, are so important now. Just like what we're doing right now, having a conversation over wine, it's an important part of, I think, a healthy civilization when people get together, have a glass of wine, and get to know each other.
Yeah.
Right? And for the naysayers about alcohol and things like that, forget to talk about the importance of connection that it brings. And we live in the most disconnected time period in I think, civilization ultimately, because we're in our silos with our phones.
Right.
And I read an interesting article in The Atlantic about how, the increase in cannabis and the decrease in alcohol is actually, and the increase in cell phone use has actually led to more isolation. So it's not just the cell phone use, but it's actually the increase in cannabis, because nothing against cannabis, but it puts you in a different mindset, right? It's more antisocial. That's one theory, but I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, right? Anyways, that kind of went down a rabbit hole on that. I apologize.
Well, I'm glad you said that. Speaking of the rabbit hole, we are very glad to have you here in the rabbit hole. We're very grateful to the rabbit hole for having us here. You think about places like Farrington House and other beautiful places here in Chapel Hill. There's none more beautiful than the rabbit hole. So thank you very much for your support. We're glad to have you here. Hopefully you feel at home in this lovely place.
Very much so. The rabbit hole is great.
Good.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you, and I don't think there's anybody better to tell us about this, is this white wine that we're having right now is not cold. To me, it's at this point very slightly chilled. Tell us a little bit about the temperature of white wines. I feel like we're drinking our white wines too cold. I think we're drinking our red wines a little too warm. Can you talk to us a little bit about what makes some of the optimal conditions for drinking red and white wine?
Yeah, and again, right, this goes to what's delicious. So what's delicious for you ultimately is important. My own, if the way I like to drink wine, and the way I like to serve wine, and I'm presenting wines to people, it all depends on the body of the white wine. This is a relatively full-bodied white wine. I don't want to serve it too chilled, but I do want to have it at this is probably, when I brought it over, like 54 or 55 degrees, which is about cellar temperature. And I think it's really nice at that point, because you get the aromatics, you get that roundness of the structure, and it still have the acidity to it. If I was bringing over a Riesling, I'd probably have it more at like 50 degrees, between like 50 and 53 degrees. But I don't get scientific about it, and because at the end of the day, it's wine, and it's meant to be enjoyed. There are certain times when you need to be scientific about it, but like I said, more full-bodied whites I like to have a little warmer, like cellar temperature. Lighter-bodied whites I like to have just a little bit more chilled.
Awesome.
Then red wines definitely depends on the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, never really over 60 degrees for me, my own taste.
Yep. Awesome. Thinking back to your journey through wine, and being at those tables, falling asleep at the foot of your mother at these tables.
Yeah.
And you talked about our world being very disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that you experienced at those tables and at dinner with people sharing wine? What was it that you saw there and learned from a very young age in terms of how important wine can be for connection?
Well, for me, it was always these opportunities because we were with relatives or my parents' friends or visiting friends like in France and the like, that it was this moment of, we're around the people that we're excited to see. It's been a while. So yes, we're going to open up wine and we're going to have conversations. And going back to that too, where do the conversations go? They go to art, they go to travel, they go to music, they go to cuisine, restaurants, all of those sort of things. And for me, in my mind as a kid, just more than anything, it was happiness, right? And that was something where if you can. And then later when I wanted to make this a career, it's like, if you can make a living making people happy, and that's ultimately the purpose of what you do for a living, you may not be a doctor saving lives, but you're at least making a small improvement on people's life.
I think that's a very powerful mission to get behind.
Yeah.
One that I certainly support.
Yeah.
It seems like wine has been around you forever. But do you think about, can you pinpoint maybe a moment or two where you really knew that this was going to be the path that you took?
Definitely. But I want to ask you that question too.
Ooh, yeah.
So let's turn it around for a second, because I'm curious about that. What is the moment or moments that turned around for you?
There's a large kind of global moment of spending my first year in France.
Mm-hmm.
And much like when you were younger at those dinner tables, just seeing how important food and wine were to bringing people together in a very intentional way.
Yeah.
2.5, 3 hour lunches, to me, blew my mind. I'm like, what am I doing here for 3 hours?
Yeah.
Why am I here this long? But when you look around the table and you see nobody has their phone, and everybody is truly engaged and curious about what's going on in other people's lives and happy to be there and excited that they're all together, it just kind of flipped a switch for me. And then being around so many people who may not be wine professionals.
Yeah.
But just like we could ask any 12-year-old boy who is Aaron Rodgers and what team he plays for and what's their record, or you ask some teenage girl, what's the last album that Taylor Swift released, it's kind of this general knowledge that everybody seems to have.
Yep.
And when I was in France, everyone seemed to have that same general knowledge to know that in Bordeaux in 2016, it was a relatively wet year.
Yep.
I don't know if that's true, but that kind of knowledge seemed very fundamental, foundational to quote unquote common folk everywhere, you know? And so I was like, man, this is something that's really cool. It's bringing a lot of people together. Everybody kind of knows about it, at least at some fundamental level. And clearly it's something that's meaningful to them. And so it just caught my attention. And then spending more time in Europe, having an opportunity to come back to France to live there for a couple more years, then it really just like set in. I mean, what an amazing place to pique your interest, to start diving down that rabbit hole.
One of the most amazing.
I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so just spending time in France, I think globally started to get my mind in that place. And then, just sharing bottles like this, where there's a moment that you're celebrating, or there's a year that you're celebrating, getting into like anniversary wines or getting your birth year wines or things like that is now like taking my mind to a whole new level of like, again, that snapshot.
Yep.
What was happening in the year that I was born or that my friend was born or that you passed your Master Sommelier exam, you know,
Yep.
like going back to 2018 and always having an opportunity to see a picture of that year is really cool. And so, and I also say coffee got me interested in wine, or coffee prepared me to be interested in wine.
Okay.
To think about a coffee bean, you take the same coffee bean and you process it differently, you roast it differently, you grind it to different, to different levels. Then you have an espresso, you have a French press, you have an AeroPress, and like
Yep.
you take this one singular coffee bean and you create so many different outcomes.
Yeah.
And so that kind of just got me prepared mentally to think about grapes and growing them in different regions and harvesting them later and, all the different variants and nuances to winemaking.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this is, to your point, this is artistic. It's scientific, but it's also very artistic. And so it just made it so much more interesting to me to explore that world and think about all the possibilities that are out there.
So it wasn't one bottle, but it was that whole experience of the, what one of my favorite things. Some of my favorite people in the world and best friends are French, and the reason, well, apart from them being good human beings who I love being around, but there's that intention when it comes to really small details about the enjoyment of life, like. You need to have the right cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where did you get your produce?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that baker, like their baguettes is perfect.
Yeah.
Their croissant,
You gotta go somewhere else for the croissant, right? But you go here for the baguette. Yeah.
Right. And but then to your point, like that deep knowledge and not just knowledge, but pride in the wines, the ciders, cognac, in the cheese and the butter. In the restaurants where the chefs are national heroes. There's something beautiful about that culture in that sense. You know what I mean? And I've always been really inspired by that.
That's awesome.
Across the board.
Man, butter. I miss French butter.
Yeah. I'm with you. I can relate to you 100% on that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, oddly enough, the bottle of wine that really got me was a bottle of red wine from the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon.
Okay.
And it was the Chateau Musar.
Yes.
And which I actually almost brought a bottle of Chateau Musar today.
We've had one on the pod.
Okay, cool.
had
Well,
an
I'm happy
88.
I didn't then.
And I think you have an earlier vintage, an 83.5 maybe, was
So the wine that really was my inspiration
something?
was a 91.
Oh, 91. Okay.
But one of my favorite wines of all time was a 1970 Musar Blanc, actually.
Interesting.
Which was, I was fortunate that in my previous position, I had the honor of working with the Hochar family, and tasting just these so many of the wines and so many different vintages going back to the 60s, and it was an education in flavor and in feeling and emotion in wine for me. And the 70, like it was youthful. It was the most bizarre thing. Like it was fresh, had great acidity, it had all these tropical fruits to it, and it made no sense to me. But for that reason, I loved it because I still to this day I'm like, how is that possible? But the bottle of wine that got me into is when I was in university and I was still in school. I was getting into wine at the same time. I was trying to figure out what we were going to do for a job, for like a job after school. Busy time, right? 16 credits, full-time job. And my passion for wine was full force. So I was up, got a book out from the University of Montana Library on wine. I'm going through this whole section on Serge Hochar and how he made wine through the Civil War. Yeah. And I was like, wow, this is the most crazy story I've ever heard, particularly like growing up in the 80s and the 90s and hearing, like watching the news from Lebanon, right? And ultimately, I walk into a wine shop in Missoula, look, 1991 Chateau Musar Rouge, $35. Well, all right. At that point, that was a big splurge for us. So I bought it. We got it, and I opened it up with my wife, and like, just blew our mind. Like at that point, I think at that point in our life, a bottle of wine maybe lasted half an hour. Like that was about 2.5 hours, right?
Wow.
Like just
Slowed it
aromas,
down.
aromatics. Yeah, like we were in our early 20s. But yeah, it really was that tasting that wine is a moment. I've a number of moments, and I'm curious to hear if you're like this too. This is how my mind works. Moments that I go back to in my life that just kind of flash into my mind, like going to school when I was 6, or doing homework in my room when I was 15, or like a perfect ski run on a powder day where I'm like, man, that felt good, right? Like those moments. That's one of those moments for me where I'm like, I stopped and like time stopped, and I remember every aroma and every taste.
That's amazing. Chateau Moussard. You know, you talked about it was surge at the time making wine then, and you know the variability of the climate and the weather, and how that's something that you have to battle with every vintage. And then you think about someone like Surge.
Tanks.
I mean, in the middle of a war.
Yep.
And like to still be making such amazing wines with a war happening around you. To me, just again, back to the stories, like, does that not make that wine exponentially more interesting? Just to think of the conditions that he was making that wine in?
Yes. All the more interesting.
All right. We got a situation here.
I get to open a bottle of wine after
I
all.
love it. So is the